Racing Academy.
Hello viewers, we have Noical back here again with us. I was thinking of doing a DVR review of his Champs TQ run, but then we were talking and we figured why not have the man himself show us why he did what he did, and he's graciously decided to show up here and help talk us through what he's thinking through every part of the track and kind of specific elements that were tricky, as well as kind of how he handled all of that. So thanks, Noical, for joining us again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Great. So just a quick intro for those that wasn't familiar. Champs just happened, and Noical was the TQ, which is top qualifier for the entire race at 59.3 seconds. It's a ridiculously fast run. We're going to show you real quick at full speed what that looks like, and then we're going to start slowing it down to break it down for us, because honestly I can't keep up with any of what's happening here. So you've got, the standard corkscrews, you have a large sweeper over here that he handles very quickly into a ladder, and then to another corkscrew, into a slalom, and then to the dive gate of doom, and back to the starting line over here. So that's what the track looks like for those that are not familiar. It's actually a very long track. He makes it look very short, but it's actually quite a long track.
Yeah.
Lots of different elements here at play, so it'll be very interesting to hear what Noical is kind of thinking about as he navigates through every single one of this. So we're going to let this whole thing run through just so that you can see what the full run looks like. So while this is happening, what was the toughest part of this track for you, Noik?
I'd say the last dive gate was the hardest thing for me.
Last dive gate?
All the other lines were pretty easy for me to figure out. Pretty much after my second run on the track, I figured everything out. But that last dive gate, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to do a toilet bowl, spiral into it, or if I just wanted to go straight in. And my first instinct was to go straight in, and I did that on my first practice run and broke an arm on my quad, and I thought it was pretty dangerous. So I started doing the toilet bowl way.
Yeah.
And I did that for most of my practice rounds. But then, I think it was right before I switched to the second track, because there's two tracks at this event. They're both identical, and they're just at different fields, so they could run two groups of pilots simultaneously. But right before I switched to my second packs on the second track, I decided to just go straight in, because I thought well, it's going to be faster, I might as well do it. And so I started practicing that instead. And I think that was probably the best move for getting the fastest time on this track. It really helped me just carry my momentum through that last section of the track, and it saved me a lot of time, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for those that are not familiar, the toilet bowl is basically, how you dive gate right here. You kind of circle around it and sink into it, kind of like a toilet bowl, versus what Noik's doing here, which is kind of a straight shot through. So, okay, great. So now we've got it running at quarter speed, just to slow it down for me to see. So why don't we just kind of talk through the track right from the beginning, because I think that the beginning has some interesting elements, right, with the elevation change and the slight kind of staggering of the gates from left to right. So
yeah,
kind of see you launch off here. Talk us through a little bit of what you're thinking as you're going through this section.
So yeah, the first part of the track, I always made sure to have a really slow launch and not be super aggressive there, because it's really hard to judge where your momentum is going to take you, when you're first starting to take off. So in general, I would just kind of cruise through there at half throttle on my first lap. And I think that's obviously not the fastest way to do it, but in a race, I think that's the best thing you could do on this track. And in a racing situation, is slow down on the very first part, especially when it's a tough element like this, where it's all momentum based and you can't really just power through it. So yeah, my instinct was to slow down here and kind of just cruise through. And so you can see me doing that. I'm not really pitched forward a lot. I'm kind of more in line with the horizon. And then right here is where I speed up. So after you get through that top gate, it's a pretty straight shot to that gate, so you can just go straight in. Yeah, and then here it's just a normal ladder, I'd say. I mean, not really anything special.
Yeah.
But this is a really hard pre-turn into this dive gate, and I think you can save a lot of time there by keeping it really tight and turning as you're coming through the top rung of the ladder. I know some pilots want to take it a little bit safer, and also I did this on the championship day, where instead of pre-turning really hard coming out of the ladder, I'd wait a second, and then I'd turn in, so I'd have a much better view of the dive as I'm going through. But here I was trying to pre-turn it hard, and just like get through there as fast as I could with a lot of speed coming through this flag section.
Yeah, and in pre-turning, you're talking about this moment right here when you're not even through a gate, you're already kind of facing to the right? Is that what
Exactly, yeah.
I got it. So you're basically going through the ladder almost blind, and you're staring at the dive as quickly as possible. It's kind of what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Okay, what about the dive itself? Did you do anything special for the dive itself?
So there was two ways you could do it. I think you could either keep turning left and go around like behind the dive gate or behind the ladder, or you could just turn like through the ladder doing a left ladder and then go right. And I decided to go right out of the top of the ladder instead of like turning around, keep going left. And I think that was probably the faster way to do it, at least in real life. I know in the sim, Hyper was experimenting a little bit with both lines and he preferred the other way. But I really liked the changing directions. I think that helped me line myself up better for that dive gate.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're saying changing directions, because you're laddering up left and then you switch to the right for the
exactly
dive, right? Interesting. Oh, that's very cool. Coming out of that, you have a quick slalom here into the corkscrew. What were you thinking here?
Yeah, so what I wanted to make sure I did on the corkscrew is keep my first turn pretty tight. With this kind of style of corkscrew where you're coming in full throttle from the front and not doing a split S, like on the GQ you did a split S into the corkscrew, but here you're just coming in straight into that first gate. This kind of obstacle is really easy to blow out that first turn. So yeah, my biggest concern on the corkscrew was making sure that first turn stayed like pretty tight, and so I was able to get through the corkscrew pretty fast. I'd say it's not as tight as I would like it to be, but it got me there. So I mean,
yeah. So are you kind of slowing down before you get to the corkscrew? Because like you were saying, you're kind of coming straight at it, and I see that you're almost kind of pre-turning a lot before you even touch the corkscrew area, right?
Yeah. So in order to not blow it out, like I tried to accelerate really hard and then decelerate super hard before getting into it. So I try to cover that ground really fast and then slow down in as short of a time as possible, but also use a lot of power to slow down. So coming into the corkscrew, you really like don't want to be going super fast. With this kind of thing, you want to almost like completely stop so you can get that first turn super tight.
Right, and for a lot of viewers out there that fly quads, slowing down and decelerating is something that's pretty hard to do. There's no brakes, right? So are you kind of sliding and doing an air brake motion? Is that what you're trying to do here?
So I was turning sideways and just trying to like use throttle to slow myself down. And if you go back a little bit, you can see I start turning away from the corkscrew really early, so I can start slowing down for it.
Yep. So right here.
Yeah, right here is where I start turning to like basically get in a little bit sideways, so I can slow down on the entry.
Got it, and kind of using your throttle to slow yourself down and get yourself into that circular motion right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next part, I think it's the sweeper.
Yeah, so the sweeper, I didn't really practice a sweeper at my house really, so I was pretty uncomfortable with the sweeper at the actual race, and you can kind of see that my entry coming out of the corkscrew was a little bit weird. So you see I am not totally lined up here. I'm like looking at the sky a little bit, because this is me looking for that first gate as I'm coming out of the corkscrew. I didn't really have the location totally memorized at this point, so I was like using this as a time to look for that gate and then line myself up so I kind of have more of a straight shot through those two gates.
Got it. You're kind of lining yourself up here, and then
and then here I'm slowing down really hard. I was really concerned. I was really concerned about my horizontal momentum coming into this gate, because it's deceptive how much speed you pick up on this track because these gates are so big. Like it feels a little bit off from where a normal 5-foot gate would feel like when you're coming in with this much speed. So it feels like you're going a little bit slower than you actually are. So you have to be really conscious in this kind of situation where you have a lot of momentum coming into a hard turn. You have to be really conscious of how much speed you're carrying. So that was a big concern of mine on this specific part of the track.
Right. The danger being that you would blow out this turn right here and go really far.
Exactly. Yeah. If you come in just full throttle and you're not really paying attention to how much speed you've picked up, it's really easy to smash into that gate.
Yeah. Watch it again, so you can see that he starts turning sideways for this gate.
It's an aggressive turn here. It's a very aggressive turn. And right here, I'm going full throttle. Because, like, that's how much speed you've picked up in that whole straight in the section before this. Like, you really you have a lot of inertia coming into this section.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was my focus to slow down that horizontal momentum and try to curve myself into this gate.
Got it. And so basically, right now you're sideways, pushing against your direction that you're headed, and full throttle to slow yourself down. That's basically what you're
Exactly, yeah.
Got it. And that swings you into the next gate right here. And then over here, you're kind of turning to go for the other one, right? It's kind of a quick change of direction there.
Yeah, so here I'm turning into the ladder.
This is a pretty smooth kind of motion into the ladder itself. You're just continuing the left turn, right?
Yeah. And then there also, it's really easy to turn a little bit too hard, and then you have to make a small correction, which you can kind of see I did. Coming out of this ladder, sometimes you might turn a little bit too far left with the line I'm taking here. And so you see right now I'm kind of aimed at, like, not really towards that gate. Yeah. So what I end up doing is just turning right a little bit to correct that. Ideally, like, that's not something you want to be doing.
Yeah.
But I think on my second lap I got it right.
Yeah, and the gates are very close together, right? So this you don't have much.
Yeah, these gates were pretty close.
And then how about this one on the way down? Do you do anything special here? I think you're pre-turning and sliding downwards, right?
Yeah, so on this gate, I just wanted, like, to just kind of do a corkscrew motion, I guess. It's more just like, ideally I wanted to be right above that gate, but I didn't do it on this lap. I kind of went outside. Mm-hmm. But for me, the best line there is to just drop right into it and not go over that outside corner.
Interesting. So you're saying to go about here instead of on that side.
That's where I wanted to be.
So it's like a very quick, it's almost like a ladder motion where you're coming down and immediately stepping forward from there.
Yeah.
Got it. Very cool. Okay, and then now into the other corkscrew, which is the other direction here.
Yeah, a little right-hand corkscrew.
Yeah. And the tricky part of this corkscrew for me when I was doing Velocidrone is you have a slalom coming up immediately and a straight to the right of it, so you really have to kind of exit well here, right? Like, I see you're exiting pointing to the right, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of how
I'm trying to get myself some sideways momentum there so I can just slide around that first flag.
Yeah. Normally, corkscrew, you would exit, like, point it that way, right? For corkscrews? So you're continuing the circular motion a little bit more is what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything to talk about for the slalom here? Standard slalom, apart from the fact that you're going up, I guess?
Yeah, so usually, like, you'd stay pretty low in a slalom like that, at least I would. And you can see I start by, like, going pretty low there. But then I really start trying to get some height at, like, going through it. So instead of just, like, going after that last flag and then going up afterwards, I tried to just continuously rise up through that slalom to get up to this height for the dive gate. Because that dive gate was really high in the air.
Yeah.
I mean, like, these flags, I think these like 3-meter flags, right? They're pretty tall. Yeah. So you really need to start, like, focusing on getting up there if you want to make it into that dive gate with the line I do here.
Right. Yeah, I see you climbing after every flag, basically. And by the time you get here, you're pretty high up. Okay, and then so now we're at the dive gate of doom. Talk us through how you aim for this one, because you're coming through the slalom with quite a lot of speed, right? So how do you navigate this one?
Yeah, so coming out of the slalom, I have a lot of, like, sideways momentum where I want to just be going straight through this gate. And you can see that gate after the dive right here. That's the next gate in the track. So you have to, like, what I was doing here was I was turning sideways really aggressively to bleed off all this extra speed that I had coming out of the slalom. And so I was using a lot of throttle here, trying to, like, reorient my my trajectory to get through this dive gate. But as you can see, I was a little bit high up on my entry. I wasn't really paying attention to how high I got. So I got a little bit higher than I wanted to be. And also I was a little bit, like, too close to the right side of the gate. So I had a lot of my attention focused on correcting for that as I went through this gate. And this is a good example of how like a single mistake can really pile up as you're flying. If you want to go back a little bit, I can explain what just happened there.
Yep.
So yeah, so I make it through this section and I get a little bit too high up, and then I get a little bit too far to the right, so I'm really overcorrecting there to make it through this gate. And you can see I just barely missed that fabric.
Yeah.
And so as I make it through this gate, like I kind of have a moment of hesitation because I'm like really close to the ground, a lot closer to the ground than I'd like to be here,
Right.
and also a little bit like to the right where usually I'd be more in the center of the gate.
Yep.
So my first thing I do is I correct for this downward momentum I have to avoid hitting the ground, but then also I have to make sure I make it through these two gates in front of me. So I kind of get a little bit too high up, and then I have another moment of hesitation where I'm trying to figure out what I need to do and where I am on the track, which ends up with me not pre-turning this ladder hard enough. And you can see I kind of had that little like jerk where I realized I need to start turning.
Yep.
And then I end up way out here, which is far from ideal. I'd much rather be closer to that gate, which would make the turn into the ladder a lot easier. Because you see, I've lost my momentum over there, so I had to square off the turn and add a lot of power to make it back through here. And then because I just spent like all my time focusing on that and not focusing ahead on the track like I should be, you really want to be thinking a few gates ahead. I ended up overturning coming out of this ladder and not being where I expected to be, which means I had to add another turn in to correct for that. And all this stemmed from just getting a little bit too high on that dive gate. So you see here I do a quick right turn, then a left again. So now I'm lined back up for this gate. But like I'm not quite where I expect to be anymore, and I'm a little bit thrown off because I've been doing all these corrections. And so now I'm like kind of in the wrong spot, not really going exactly where I want to be. I like to be really close to that center bar on this double gate here, but I was pretty high up. And I knew here that I'm pretty far away from like my ideal trajectory coming through that gate after this double gate. And I'm like, I have a lot of vertical momentum that I need to cancel out. So now I'm going sideways at full throttle and looking at the ground.
Yeah, this is like full ground.
So yeah, right here, I see him way too high up and I'm not going down fast enough. So I just point straight towards the ground and go full throttle. And that gets me through this gate, luckily. And then I'm kind of disoriented, so I do a little bit of a left-right there. And then now this is a section where I'm really confident, so I'm able to kind of reset and get back on my line. Yeah, and then past this point, everything is pretty good. But yeah, so all that, like for that half lap there where I was kind of freaking out and almost crashing at every single turn, that was just because I got a little bit too high up on that one dive gate.
Right.
So I think it's pretty interesting to see just like how getting off your line at any point in the track really messes you up for the rest of the track.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And remember, we're playing this back at a quarter speed, so all of those minor corrections that he just did was all in the span of like half a second, right? So like,
Yeah, it was all super fast.
That's how quickly he was making those decisions. So this one right here, you can see he kind of went.
Yeah, that
over
was
the
much
crossbar.
closer to my ideal line.
So yeah, that was what he was saying. So you see how the crossbar is here, he goes over it, so that's very tight. Beautiful.
Yeah, and then also this turn, making it into one continuous turn, saves a lot of time.
Sorry, this one right here?
Yeah, so coming out of this gate and into the corkscrew, you can lose a lot of time by going too wide and then lining yourself up for this corkscrew rather than doing a blind turn, which is kind of what I ended up doing. I just went out of that gate and immediately turned really hard.
Yeah, and
just
so
continued that left turn
into that. Beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that saved me a lot of time.
We're back to this dive here. You're gaining altitude again. What did you do differently this time?
I had a lot less sideways momentum this time, so I started slowing down a lot earlier. And that ended up giving me a much cleaner entry into this dive gate, and I was a lot more confident on this one.
Right, you're very much.
You can see I'm not as close to the wall, and I'm already like flattened out here, so I'm not heading towards the ground anymore.
Yeah, you're much further away from the ground this one. So much tighter on the ladder, and that lets you kind of slingshot out to the ideal positioning for the timing gate.
Exactly.
And on that straight section after the timing gate, are you full throttle the whole way? Do you drop any throttle as you're kind of coming back down after the crossbar, or are you just kind of pitching forward for it?
So I say I'm probably at like 50 or 60% throttle as I exit the timing gate. And then, yeah, so right here, I'm lowering my throttle a lot.
Okay.
I'm not going as fast because I don't want to be coming to the top rung of that, this like vertical slalom thing right here very fast. I like to go slow through there because it's really hard to bleed off all that speed when you're trying to get into the gate after it. So I'm not using a lot of throttle right here. I'm kind of cruising into this gate and just trying to make sure I get through everything. And right here, I put on the power. So because this is just a straight shot, I'm able to just go full throttle here and then maintain that high power coming through this ladder right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, because the elevation change is always very tricky for me. I have a very hard time with them. I usually just drop throttle to fall back down, and that's a very slow way of doing it, right? You really don't want to drop throttle.
Yeah.
You want to pitch forward instead.
Yeah, and that was really hard. I know a lot of pilots were doing a turnaround there, so they could go like full throttle into that gate and bleed off all the speed and drop into the next one. But for me, that wasn't really an option because I was trying to set the fastest times. So I ended up just like kind of slowing down a little bit, but every time like pushing myself to add a little bit more power, just try to get a little bit faster through there. Because I mean, like I know pilots like Min Chan Kim who are practicing that obstacle on their own in practice. They're just going full throttle, and that's the ideal. But it's really hard to get there in an actual race scenario. So a lot of the time on this track, I was just going for whatever I knew would get me like through the track, be pretty fast, but also be pretty consistent for me.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. On the dive gate, just because this one seems to be a really tough one for a lot of people, how do you decide how high you want to kind of enter from? Because I see that your entry point, when you're kind of up here, you're basically forming a straight line through it, right? And you're pretty high up. So how high do you want to get above these obstacles and slicing through it versus, like a lower, I guess, altitude where you're more knife edging it to a certain extent? How do you decide what do you want to do for that?
Well, for me, I went that high because that was what I was most comfortable with doing. I felt like this is a pretty straight shot. You can see like the holes kind of line up when I'm at that altitude, and so that's how I judged it. I'd say it was more of just like a feel thing for me. I wasn't really thinking about it, but the knife edge, like staying low, is definitely faster. You can definitely get through that gate a lot faster if you go lower than I did. But for me, I wanted, yeah, that gate was really hard if you wanted to stay low. Getting through this second low gate on the ground after that dive gate, if you have a low entry into that dive, is really tough. So I opted to not go for that.
Right. You're basically thinking more gates ahead, right? Even though you could do it kind of knife edging that one, getting through the next couple will be really tough. So you're thinking kind of a couple gates ahead.
Exactly, yeah.
And I see there's some guide wires over here. You can't really see them when you're racing, right? So do you just kind of get a rough feel for where they are and swing a little wider? What's your strategy in dealing with them?
Yeah, so when I'm doing a track walk, I always like make sure to note where all the guide wires are. And I try to like take the first rung of these ladders a little bit wide and just like try to keep my distance from everything where there could be a wire. Because really like I didn't want to have my best run ruined by hitting a piece of string. So I just decided to take everything a little bit wider than I normally would. And I never hit a guide wire at the entire event because of that. So it worked out pretty well.
That makes a lot of sense. And so for a track like this, right, how do you first kind of come up with the line that you want to take through it? Do you just kind of slowly iterate as you practice through the day? Are there kind of certain guiding factors that you use to guide, how you figure out what's the fastest line through it?
Yeah, so usually I'll think about like what my speed will be like when I'm entering and exiting an obstacle, and then try to think of my lines around that. Because I know if I'm entering an obstacle at really high speed, it's going to be really hard to make it through the next few gates after that if it's like a tough line. Like this, for instance, you could get through that dive gate super fast if you wanted to, but it would make those next two gates pretty much impossible to get through cleanly. Because you'd be thinking so hard about getting through this dive gate really fast, you don't really have like time to think about what's after the dive gate. So taking a safer route here where I don't really have to think so much about this dive gate and I can think ahead allowed me to have a little bit more speed in this section.
Got it.
Yeah, so I think like knowing where you're going to be moving really fast and where it's going to be easy to blow things out helps you plan out your lines. So I'd say think about your momentum and like what it's going to be like in each section of the track, and then you can plan out how you want to take things based on that.
That makes sense.
Like this track had a lot of momentum involved, I'd say, especially at that first part right after the timing gate.
Right.
Yeah, so planning out your lines, thinking of what your speed's going to be like is going to help you just get the fastest time overall. Like you might not be the fastest on one individual obstacle, but if you are able to maintain a really constant pace, that usually is what gets you the fastest times.
Got it. And on your corkscrew, since I think you're very famous for your corkscrew, what are you usually kind of aiming to hit? Are you trying to aim for a top corner? Are you aiming for the middle of the gate? Where are you looking at when you're trying to, like, for example, hit this corkscrew right here? Are you kind of looking at the top left corner, top middle? What's the kind of best spot to look for when you're going through this?
For me, I'm usually aiming for like the top middle of the gate.
Okay.
And my corkscrew line is a little bit weird. I know some other pilots, they like to go directly over the gate and like kind of do more like a straight line kind of thing, where I'm more like this. I kind of go sideways and like spiral through with a little bit more horizontal momentum, I'd say.
So you mean like when you're coming over you're almost kind of past the gate when you're apex. Got it.
Exactly. And then I know a lot of other people, they might aim for the center of the gate, whereas I'm not really thinking so much about that, and I'm just like carrying my momentum more. And the way I do it allows me to just go full throttle through the whole thing if I do it right. Here I was not doing that. You can see I kind of square it off a little bit. But ideally with this line, I'm able to go full throttle through the whole thing and kind of just hold my roll instead of doing like a little bit of correction to stay in the middle of the gate. I'm not really moving my sticks at all while I'm doing a corkscrew.
Right.
I'm more just going as much throttle as possible and holding my roll in like one spot.
Interesting. And when you make adjustments to a corkscrew, like you mentioned, you made a bit of adjustments to that. Is it mostly on the roll axis, or do you make adjustments on the throttle axis?
So it really depends on like what my entry's like. Every corkscrew is a little bit different, I'd say. Just because you're never entering from exactly the same spot.
Yeah.
But in that corkscrew specifically, I think there was a lot of pitch corrections going on actually. And that's what caused me to like kind of slow down while I'm getting to the top of it, and then I continue through.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's a lot of micro corrections because I'm not used to doing corkscrew on such big gates.
Yeah, these are bigger than normal too, right?
Yeah, so like I wasn't quite like I didn't really have any muscle memory for this size of a corkscrew, so I wasn't really able to hold it like I usually do with my 5x5 gates. Kind of makes me want to buy championship size gates, actually.
Gotta practice on what you're gonna race at.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's the full walkthrough of the entire track. Any closing thoughts while I show our viewers once again what your run looks like at full speed? Blow their minds.
Yeah. I guess the main thing here is just go fast. That's all you need to do. It's easy, right? Just go fast.
Yeah.
No, but it really there's a lot of thought involved in like the lines you want to take, and if something's slower or faster, how will it benefit you as you're flying? Like right there, that huge mistake. That could have been pretty easily avoided if I had slowed down a little bit more on the entry to that dive gate. And because of that, I lost a lot more time than if I had just slowed down on one obstacle. So, like, one small mistake can really add up in how much time it eats away from, like, your overall speed. So I'd say think more about keeping your average velocity, your average momentum pretty consistent. Just keeping your speed really constant throughout the whole track is what really gets fast times. So here, even though I made that one mistake, I was able to correct for it by just holding my pace, and I managed to get TQ.
Yes,
So
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, even on the lap that you supposedly made a mistake, you still hit a 20. So you saved it for sure.
Yeah, because I knew if I wanted to have a good time, I would have to go really fast for the rest of that lap to make up for the mistake that I did at the first part. So I pushed really hard on that lap. I say my flying in the second half of that lap was like my best flying the whole event. And so yeah, it all evened out.
Got it. So would you say when you're kind of racing in qualifying or even heats that you're usually flying at like, I don't know, 80% or 90% of your maximum speed potential? Because it sounds like you hit an extra gear you can hit when you need to, right?
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably in brackets flying at around 70% of like my fastest speed.
Mm-hmm.
In qualifying, it depends on the track. Like I know on the global qualifier, I'm really comfortable on 5-foot gates, and since that's all 5-foot gates, I felt really comfortable on that track, and pretty much any track that's all 5-foot gates, I feel really comfortable on. So I'm able to go like 95% all the time on those tracks. I'd say qualifying at champs, I was probably like at my fastest, going like 85 to 80% of what I could really like how fast I could really go. Because at a big event, my biggest concern was not really like being the fastest, but like having consistent runs and getting in practice for the actual race.
Right.
Yeah. So like,
That makes sense.
I think if I had this track set up in my backyard and I could practice it for a whole day, I'd be doing 17s. But because I only had like limited runs, 2-hour breaks between each run, this is what I ended up with.
Right. What you ended up with is the top qualifier.
Still pretty good.
Yeah, still pretty good, I'd say. Yeah, kind of good. Okay. So, thank you so much for walking us through this. It's been immensely helpful. I've learned a ton. I'm sure our viewers would also have learned a ton from this. So, really, really appreciate you spending your time talking us through this. And once again, thank you for kind of working with us on this. Viewers out there, Noical's YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to it. He's got tons of great commentary and videos on his flying, and you can keep getting your mind blown on a consistent basis if you subscribe. So make sure you subscribe, and subscribe to Drone Racing Academy as well. So once again, thank you, Noical, and I look forward to our next video.
Yeah, it was great working with you, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, take care. See you guys.